Welcome to another episode of More Up North. I'm Shannyn Moore, and I'm so glad you're joining us for what I think is going to be a fantastic show. Actually, I know it will be. I promise, and I don't always do that. First of all, this week we found out that a judge sided with some of our Alaskan brothers and sisters who work very hard to take care of our dirty tourists. So we're going to be talking to Marvin Jones about that. And then something that's a bigger concept for Alaska, but we should be applying to everything we're doing, which is that we are an owner state. We absolutely are. We have the man who helped write our Constitution, Fischer, here. We've got Malcolm Roberts, and we've got Dr. Jack Hickel here for a panel on the owner state. And you know, if you get a permanent fund and you live in Alaska, maybe you should know a little bit more about it. That's at least what I thought. So I've got them here. We're going to be asking them lots of questions. We'll be right back after this break with More Up North. Elected president of Unite Here, Local 878, by union members in 2000. He's led negotiations and bargained dozens of union contracts with employers across Alaska. Before that, he served as the bellman at the Anchorage Sheraton Hotel for 14 years. Please welcome Marvin Jones. Mr. Jones.
Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations on an amazing week. We're going to have to take people back a little ways, of course. For 2.5 years, there has been litigation and fighting between your organization, your workers that you represent, and their employers, the Sheraton,
right,
and subsequently the Hilton as well.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit what the breakdown was when Texas moved in?
Well, going back a little bit, for 30 plus years, we've had an excellent relationship with what I call the big three: the Sheraton, the Hilton, and Captain Cook Hotel. One of the things was that these hotels were locally owned, and the dynamics have changed when outside companies began to buy these hotels, the Sheraton and the Hilton, and we began to sit at the bargaining table and began to quickly find out that these guys in no way were looking to get an agreement when they came in and gutted the contract and requested and proposed to take away health benefits, increase workloads, and then shortly after began to harass workers when things didn't go their way. So the dynamics have changed over the last 30 years and very quickly over the last 2.5 to 3 years. Only thing that's remaining now is the Captain Cook, which obviously is still locally owned and is the leader in setting the standards and what the work rules are and bargaining in good faith.
Well, I think it's really different if you have someone in an office building a couple thousand miles away looking at a list of people or looking at just numbers, just money numbers, and not having to say, "Good morning, Cheryl. Hi, Tom."
Right.
In the morning when they go to work. Those people are thousands of miles away, but they happen to be our brothers and sisters, our neighbors here in Alaska. And at the Captain Cook, the owners see the people that work for them. I mean, there's just, but it doesn't have to be locally owned to treat people with respect.
Right.
And so this week, a judge ordered that management had to change their ways.
Right. Last week, a federal judge put in what they call a 10J, an injunction against the Sheraton Hotel, basically putting things back to the point that when we had a contract, when the contract was still in existence. Obviously, the contract has expired, but they're demanding that the injunction is in place and based on the egregious acts by management. So one of the things that really gets missed in translation is that the harassment, all the mean tactics by management to coerce workers to sign a desert petition. Workers were being threatened that if they did not sign a petition, their hours would be cut, or they would be terminated. And management did make good on some of those promises. In the beginning, the Sheraton Hotel fired 4 workers for handing out leaflets to intimidate other workers. The National Labor Relations Board filed charges, and they brought those 4 workers back to work. And then shortly after, other workers were held in rooms for over 3 hours and was forced to sign petitions to desert. We have on record where one gentleman was held in a room for 3 hours, and then once he left, management texted him on his phone and said, sign the petition, you know we'll always cover your black A. And that was turned over to the federal government. And before he testified, they approached him in the federal building in court and tried to get him to lie on the stand. So these are things that are documented and show the lengths that management will go to, get rid of the union and take benefits and the livelihoods away from these workers.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I believe you. But all of this for what? For the corporation to make more money off the backs of Alaskans?
Personally, coming from the industry, going back some 20 plus years, one of the things I think that this company thought they were going to come in, that we were a bunch of yokels up in Alaska and that they can come in here and steamroll us. And
we are a bunch of yokels in Alaska.
I don't mind being a yokel, but
we just stand up for the other yokels.
Right, and they took it for granted that we would roll over, and they didn't understand the fight in these workers. It's not because of the union or the local that they stood up against these workers. It's because these workers demanded respect, that these workers felt that they've given their livelihoods to this hotel. We have workers that have been there over 30 years. Mm-hmm. And for someone to come in town and think that they can just take what these guys have put their blood, sweat, and tears in and think these guys are going to roll over, they were sadly mistaken. And they've held in there for over 2.5 years to show these guys that we're going to stay until the very last day, until we get a fair contract.
Well, I'm really glad that the original 4 have been reinstated. There are other people who were fired as well, and so that's still in court. There's still, 20 counts, 16 counts?
There, in the initial trial, actually, just to let you know, we went to trial for 6 months over 16 charges. 14 of those charges were moved forward. 2 of them were dismissed. Not one single charge from the employer against the union was upheld. There's an additional 30-plus charges since the trial against the hotel for illegal acts against the workers. So this shows you an example of the length that this employer would go to get what they want. Obviously, it's more money in their pocket and less in the workers' pocket.
Right, and their pockets don't live here.
Their pockets don't live here,
they
have deep pockets.
And they have deep ones. Well, thank you so much. What can folks do to support Alaskan workers who are working so hard, doing something I wouldn't want to do?
Well, we ask the community is when we picket, please come out and support us. If you're just driving by, please honk your horn, but please don't patronize these properties until this company or these companies understand that these workers support our community. Right. That if they're not making a decent wage, they're not able to go and put money back into the community. Our community is going to, if we don't win this war, our community is going to feel this one way or another. We have with the 2 hotels, we have over 300 families that depend on decent wages and benefits. And if we don't win this war, it's going to have a greatly negative impact on our community. And I would hope that the community would step up and find out what our issues are and get involved and do not support these hotels until we get a fair contract.
Right. I know that there have been several events scheduled, galas or whatever, where I'm like, sorry, can't come. Should have had it at the Captain Cook. Just saying. We'll be right back. Thank you, Marvin.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You were great.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
You were great. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back to what I think is going to be an amazing panel. First, he was a territorial legislator and a delegate to Alaska's Constitutional Convention and former state senator. Say hello to our very own modern-day Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, whatever, and my good friend, Alaskan treasurer Vic Fischer. And next to him, he's a board-certified family physician working for Native Health in Alaska. For 15 years, he's worked in Swaziland as a medical missionary, helping to run hospitals and bush clinics. His other project is introducing the leaders of the Sudan to the owner state concept. Please welcome Dr. Jack Hickel. I told you it was high-powered tonight. He's a senior fellow with the Institute of the North and author of The Wit and Wisdom of Wally Hickel. Please say hello to longtime Hickel aide and to my friend Malcolm Roberts.
Thank you.
I know. I'm the luckiest girl I know. Thank you all for being here. I really thought that we, in all of our conversations about oil and gas or development or fisheries or anything else, this little word pops up or this little phrase, owner state, and then it sort of drifts off and it pops up again. And it shouldn't be something that just pops up. I think it's like the biggest thing going for Alaska is that we're an owner state. And I thought maybe since you wrote about it and they called it the Constitution, it'd be great to have you here as to tell us a little bit, what was the discussion or what were the options if we weren't an owner state, and what is an owner state?
Well, if we were not an owner state, the federal government would control everything before we became a state. The federal government controlled 99.95%. That's almost 100% of all the land in Alaska. With statehood, we got ownership of 104 million acres. That's about 28% of all the land in Alaska. And we got to select it. And we selected Prudhoe Bay. And the difference is that we simply wouldn't have any power, we wouldn't have any authority. Now we own close to 1/3 of Alaska, and it includes Prudhoe Bay. It provides the income that keeps our infrastructure going, that gets the teachers paid and everything. And we have Congress to thank for that. In the Statehood Act, Congress specifically provided that we not just get the land, surface, when we get the resources that are on the land, under the land. And that's made all the difference. That's why we own the land, we own the resources, and we can't, even if we wanted to, we couldn't just give the resources away or sell the resources without keeping control. We are the owners. We can lease the resources, and we have leases that under which Prudhoe Bay oil is being produced. We get the money to keep Alaska going.
So Jack, we're just going to go down the line here. Owner state, what does it mean to you?
You know, it's interesting. The key words that Vic used here were, we own it. Now, this is not private ownership. He doesn't own, these 100 acres. We own it collectively. And this is exciting stuff. It's the government is kind of responsible for making sure that we benefit collectively, everybody in the state benefit equally from these resources. We own it, and that's where my dad kind of coined the term of the owner state. People don't really understand that term, but when you just think if you focus on the idea of the owner, we are the owners. It is our land, it's our resources, and we need to benefit from that. And as it's written in the great Constitution that Vic helped put together, those resources must be used for the maximum benefit of the people, not for the maximum benefit of an oil company or for a government official, but for the maximum benefit of you and me equally.
I wonder if they've read that part sometimes.
I think they whited it out or something. They clipped that. They don't understand it. The oil companies do not have a clue really what this means.
Well, we had Marvin Jones on talking about, his workers who collectively bargain. And whenever we're compared, to North Dakota or Texas or these other places, I sort of have that same concept when I look at Alaska. We collectively bargain our resources instead of the oil companies going to each individual landowner like they do. I mean, there's a real unionization of Alaskans here for our resources. Malcolm,
Yeah, well, this came out of the fact, and Vic can verify because I wasn't here at the time, but in our battle for statehood, Congress didn't think we should get statehood because they thought we'd just be a burden on the federal government. Until Wally Hickel and others went back there and said, give us what we own and we'll create a great State of the Union. Give us the resources, give us enough of land. When he went back there in '52, there was a bill that had passed the U.S. House that only gave us 3 million acres and 20 million to the university. He went to see the head Republican in the Senate, Robert Taft, and Taft said, well, young man, how much do you need? And Wally blurted out 100 million acres. Now, a number of people would have said, well, 3 million, maybe we need 6. He said 100 million. Well, that caught on, and others pushed that idea. Taft got that act, that bill, recommitted, and all the bills from then on, from '52 until eventual passage in '58, had at least 100 million acres in it. That's what we own. That's why we're such a fortunate part of the world.
it's amazing. What if he'd said 200 million?
Yes.
No, I mean, the understanding that the reason that we got this, the reason Wally went back there, the reason that you and so many of our founders wrote in and decided and determined was that we wanted to be self-determining. We wanted to be able to support ourselves. We didn't want this, pipeline from the lower 48 with just money, although it sort of worked out that way, thanks to earmarks for a while. But that we wanted to support ourselves, that frontier spirit is what built this, and it wasn't out of, some sort of, I don't know, any other sort of grab. It was really so we could take care of ourselves. We've got to run to a break. We're going to come back with our panel in just a moment with more Up North. All right, welcome back to our panel and more Up North. I'm Shannyn Moore, and I just, I really love being, I don't think I could live in a state that wasn't an owner state, just because it's one of my favorite things. I feel like we're the boss of us, or we should at least remember that we have some sovereignty. Your pop was really great about letting oil companies know Alaska was a sovereign, very much so. Had no problem saying, but we're Alaska. Mm-hmm. And I think that was endearing to him. It's certainly absent from what we have in leadership right now. But not only does the owner state grant us 103 million acres, but also a lot of responsibility. Well,
the very first section of the Alaska Constitution talks about the rights that we have as citizens. Each person has a right to privacy, has a right to is equal, and so on. And then it says that in return, each of us, all persons, have a corresponding obligation to the people and to the state. In other words, we are a collective, unlike other states that don't own the land together, that don't have the kind of rights that we have in our Constitution. They don't have this in the Constitution, that they have a responsibility to vote, to participate, to speak, and to manage the lands and the resources effectively. And that's a responsibility of mine and yours and everybody's to all the other people of the state and to the state government itself. That we can't just step back, as they might in Texas, and say, okay, it's all for me and I don't give a damn about the rest of the people, the rest of the state.
Right, so we've got to show up for each other.
Right.
I've wondered how it would be if in order to get a permanent fund and you're over 18, you had to show proof that you voted.
I think that's a great idea.
You know?
I think that would be a terrific idea. Number one, people would pay more attention to what's happening, how money is invested, about ideas that's being floated around Juneau right now to give away $2 billion a year of our income to give it back to the oil companies. People would stand up and say, wait a minute, you can't do that to us.
Right. Well, you know, isn't it a bit of a misnomer to call it a tax when really it's wholesale? It's like...
It's a fee being paid for our resources. It's not the oil company's resources at Prudhoe Bay, it's ours. So they're yes. So they pay a royalty and they pay a fee to be able to take oil and gas and market it.
Yeah, it's like if you had an apple orchard and they're your apples, but you can't pick them, so you hire somebody to pick them, and they get a part of the apples, you know. Well, they're still your apples. They're just getting those because they picked them for you. Sure. I mean, it's not that difficult to tear apart. This week, there was a memo that was introduced in Juneau at the Senate Resources, which I've been riveted by. I know. Sorry I watched it so you don't have to. It was really interesting because it was a May 20th, 1977 document that was between the oil companies, the big three, and they had decided that they were going to raise the tariffs above what they should be on the pipeline because they were just taking money out of one pocket and putting it into their other pockets, so they weren't going to lose any money, but the state of Alaska was, and they were figuring out how to sort of make sure that they could milk that side of it. $13.5 billion should have come to Alaska that didn't because of that decision they made in that letter, which was written the month before the oil pipeline started. Judge Gleason just said that the pipeline is worth $9 billion, so I say they give us the pipeline and about $4.5 billion is what they owe us. Yeah. Which I'm sure some people would say is taking the owner state a little too far, Shannyn, but they forgot it. Mm-hmm. They forgot it or ignored it or went around the owner state first, and then we sort of collectively forgot about it as well. So bringing this concept back that this is ours, not yours, instead of this, there's sort of a Stockholm syndrome almost going on.
Yeah, well, this is a real example where we, the people, need to pay attention to what's happening at the state level because the state government agreed to a settlement with the oil companies, with the owners of the pipeline, to agree to raise the tariff. The state didn't fight it, and they should have.
Right. They're not doing their homework either.
Right.
Well, and how much of this has to do with money? You know, the money that comes to politicians when they're running for office. I mean, I think a lot of them are terrified to go up against them or be crossed because then the oil companies are going to fund whoever their opponent is.
Shannyn, that's absolutely right. If I can jump in here, because you said, you know, we forgot about it, we didn't notice it. The people in political office knew about it. They just didn't want to challenge the oil companies because they were counting on them for campaign contributions and so on. When Governor Hickel, who I worked with, last took office in 1990, he found $4 billion of unpaid royalties and taxes, and he took them to the mat. And Charlie Cole helped him, and Senator Cotton from the Senate helped too. They got $4 billion of unpaid, but the previous governors just didn't want to upset these sources of campaign revenues. Wally took them on, And that's where we got our Constitutional Budget Reserve Fund, that $4 billion that tided us over in some tough years.
Well, and yeah, it's amazing. Well, I heard a funny story too about Wally when he was running, which I'm sure there's several, but that he had collected all these campaign checks that were being sent to him by the oil companies or by oil company execs, and then once he won, he called them into office and gave them their checks back uncashed.
Absolutely right.
Is this a true story?
Absolutely right.
See,
It was, in fact, he did not collect it from them. They didn't think he had a chance. Remember, he ran on the Alaska Independence ticket?
Yeah.
They thought he was so long shot, they didn't back him. As it looked like the momentum was building, they began sending in these checks. It was over $300,000 of checks. He put them on his desk, invited them in, and said, "Gentlemen, I'll be fair, but take your money." And they took it and left.
wow. Yeah, I can't imagine that happening now. I just can't imagine it happening now. And speaking of Wally, we're going to come back from this break and show a clip of the former Governor Hickel, and we'll be right back after this break. All righty, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. Mr. Roberts, you brought a special video to share with us. Tell me about this.
Well, in September of 2009, several of us at the Institute of the North, including Governor Hickel, were invited to a conference in Durban, South Africa, talking about the future of Africa and how to break out of the cycle of exploitation and poverty. And the governor was really torn because he was 90 years old. He was too old to travel. So we cut a little 2-minute video with his message for Africa, the owner state's message from Alaska to Africa. So if you'd like to, I think we could show it.
All right, I think we should show it. Here's the video of
I
Governor
salute
Wally
the
Hickel.
organizers of this conference. Your determination to reclaim the commons send a signal around the world, reaching us in the far north. In Alaska, we live on the commons. We benefit from the commons. We care for the commons. From common ownership of our land and our resources has emerged a new model for modern society. We call ourselves the owner state, and what we own is the commons. We believe our model surpasses both capitalism and socialism. When this approach is understood worldwide, there will be no legitimate reason for poverty, especially in Africa, a continent so rich in resources. This year, Alaska marks its 50th anniversary as one of the 50 United States. But we are different from all the others. Prior to statehood, we were a colony and a helpless victim of mining, fishing, and shipping monopolies. They plundered our resources and left our people ignorant and in poverty. Just as multinationals today plunder South America, Asia, and Africa, sucking the wealth from the resource-rich commons, leaving the rightful owners hungry and destitute. My son Jack, my grandson Jason, and other Alaskans are in Durban today to tell our story. I urge you to study the building blocks of the owner state. We are far from perfect, but our experience can be helpful as you reclaim your commons. I have visited Africa 3 times, and I sincerely believe that Africa will become the continent of light, the continent with an answer for a world in desperate need. Godspeed, and God bless you.
Wow, that was amazing. The whole concept of the commons, and you were there, Jack. You're the
Yes.
son, Jack, that he was talking about, of course, in this video. And you were bringing this message of the commons, that we aren't a colony, we are a people of the commons. We are an owner state. How did that go there, and what have you done since?
You know, it's very interesting. Very few of us remember how Alaska was plundered by the outside interests before we became a state. But that is happening right now all over the continent of Africa. in Sudan, South Sudan, Nigeria, Angola, Chad. The plundering has gone on for decades, and nobody has paid any attention to it. So after we attended this, at the end of this conference, we got together and we decided, with the help of a grand leader from Uganda, to say we need a global campaign for the commons, to take what we have in the Alaska model, which has overcome the colonialism, the plundering, and we've set up a model that works for us. We can take this jewel that we have created and take it to the world that is so desperate for a new way of doing things. And that's the vision we have, and that's what we hope to do. Look what's going on in the world right now. You've had the Arab Spring, people demanding a better way of doing things. They're tired of being exploited. They're tired of being plundered by their governments and by multinational corporations who don't care for them. Look what's going on with the Occupy movement in New York and now around the world. It spread so quickly because there's a common feeling here that people are being forgotten, being abused, and that there's no hope anymore, that the governments are not representing their true interests. A global campaign for the commons will help prevent what we know so well as the resource curse. For those who don't understand that, these countries that are resource rich, such as in Africa, when they start to develop their resources, the government officials become wealthier and so do the multinational corporations. The people become poorer. In Nigeria specifically, since oil was discovered in the 1960s, people's wealth has been cut by a half. The poverty rate is 70%. 70% of the people make less than $1 a year, and that has doubled the poverty rate since the oil companies started developing the oil there. Oil companies have gotten incredibly rich, and so have the government officials. An owner-state model prevents this. If people become aware that that resource is theirs, it doesn't belong to the oil company, it's theirs, and they have a right to it. And establishing a model like ours where people can benefit from the oil directly will help change the world.
But you have to have the people who become part of that commons and part of that owner state or owner country in some cases. You have to have them respect that they are that, right, and to stand up in that power, because it's tremendous. How do you think this? Did you ever think this model of Alaska, when you were building it, would be taken to hopefully? I mean, it takes time, but to really effectively fight poverty?
It's not just a matter of fighting poverty, it's a matter of bringing democracy to other places. Over the past 20 years, I was involved in Alaska-Russia relations. And I had a chance to meet with people who were writing, after the Soviet Union fell apart, writing their constitutions, sort of equivalent of state constitutions. And it was fascinating. I went to an organization, a nonprofit in Moscow, and asked them, do you have any translated American documents into Russian that I could use to discuss with local people? And they gave me a copy of the Alaska Constitution that had been translated into Russian. And I was able to meet with legislators at the regional level and discuss with them the basic concepts of the democratic ownership of resources, the elections, and all of the ways of avoiding corruption and all that sort of stuff. So the Alaska model, both in terms of land ownership, the commons, and the basic concepts have applicability all the way around the world.
Wow. We've got to run to a break. We're going to come back with questions from our audience for our amazing panel here on More Up North. Oh, I have a great job, don't I? People just clap for me. I like it. Well, when they hold up a sign to tell them to, they do. It's great. So we've got our questions from our audience for a fantastic panel. Are you ready?
Ready?
Ready.
Dear Shannyn, what is your favorite bumper sticker ever? Oh, look, I've got it right here. It says, "Don't blame me, I voted for Scott McAdams." That's a great question. All right. What good is the owner state when we have a governor like Parnell who wants to give it all away?
What good is the owner state? We have the right we have the obligation to speak out and say, Governor, let's do it the democratic way. Let's not give our resources, our income away to the multinational oil corporations.
Being authors of the Alaska State Constitution, how do you feel about the current administration wanting to remove the word conservation and future from the mission statement of the Department of Natural Resources?
Well, I think it's sort of ridiculous to take it out. It is in the Constitution, and they do have the obligation, the legislature in particular. Let me quote it to you.
Sure.
Directly. I'm sitting on the Constitution here.
You're the only person I'd let do that.
Here's what it says. The legislature shall provide for utilization, development, and conservation of all natural resources belonging to the state, including land and waters, for the maximum benefit of its people. Conservation is right in there. The legislature has the obligation to include that, and they have the authority and obligation, and they can change what the governor and the Commission of Natural Resources have proposed.
Good, and they should. All right, here's one. Anybody can grab this. What does maximum benefit mean?
Well, the maximum benefit, I think we're one of the most fortunate corners of the world anywhere. I mean, the beauty of our state, the tremendous wealth of our resources, the involved community, those who take the owner state seriously, whether they understand the phrase or not. We share a permanent fund dividend every year. Where does that come from? It's not just because government is generous, it's because we own those resources and the revenues from it, and so we get a dividend every year. We're very, very fortunate. So those are all examples of the maximum benefit of using our resources.
Maximum benefit. Okay, so what can we as individuals do, and what actions can we take now? Call the governor, 465-3500. I got it on speed dial, Shawnico. I gotcha. Anything else you think people should do? Show up and figure out who gets owner state that's running to represent your district, and show up for them. Show up for them, walk door to door for them, answer phones for them, contribute your time or your money or whatever you have, and make sure this is a question that you ask people running for office. What are your feelings on the owner state?
Right, and be very active during the election campaign, because there's going to be a phenomenal amount of money that'll come from the corporations that will not be in the interest of the people for the maximum benefit of Alaska. The oil money, the other corporate money, will be designed to elect the kind of legislators who will not protect the resources of Alaska. And I think it's real important that people track the money and then vote for those who will act as managers of the owner state.
Absolutely, and it seems as though the Senate bipartisan working group gets that.
Yes.
House Republicans, not so much. But if you remember, wasn't it one of the House Republicans, Pete Cott, who was told by Bill Allen, "I own your ass"? Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and then he went to jail, and they both went to jail, and it was really cute. But anyway, we got to take a quick break. We've got lots more questions from our audience members. We'll be right back with more Up North. Welcome back. Oh, lots more questions. Jack, maybe you can take this one, because your father's video brought this up. Please draw a clear distinction between socialism aspects and capitalism earn your way benefits at owner state commons.
it's very interesting because the owner state is not a communist or socialistic philosophy. We have seen historically that communism did not work. And we've seen that capitalism sold us out. And that's one of the reasons we had this huge recession, wasn't it? It was financial greed. Corporations, financial institutions got us into trouble. So capitalism works, but it needs to be regulated. What we have with the owner state, we have commonly owned resources. This is not socialism, but we have commonly owned resources, but it's developed through a democratic process using private enterprise, unlike communism, unlike socialism. So it's a hybrid of the two. Commonly owned resources in a democratic society, but these resources are developed by private enterprise. Private enterprise, though, that has restrictions and regulations put upon them. And that's what makes us successful.
No wonder they don't like it.
They don't like it. That's why some of the oil companies in Nigeria and South Sudan don't want to listen to what we have to say, because it doesn't benefit them in their state of trying to load their pockets as much as they can, as quickly as they can.
I'm sure they're like, what? A Hickel? I thought we left them in Alaska. Oh, what about municipal parklands? Can the people of the city consider themselves owners of the land that taking priority over the city goods, taking over the use of that land? So, like, I'm
Vic's
guessing
a city planner. He should be able to answer that one.
Well, this is related to the owner state concept. Of course, we, the people of the city, own the city's land. And through our elected government, we essentially make the rules and manage it. I think this is, if we're talking about the occupying parkland, it's not just the owner state concept. The basic element of the U.S. and the Alaska Constitution is that we have the right to free speech, and so from that standpoint, there's just no question that people have a right to be there, so long as they don't interfere with with others. And it's again the obligation to the people, and in this case to the municipality as a whole.
So here's, Malcolm, maybe you could answer this. Did Governor Hickel go to Texas or London to meet with or negotiate with oil companies? Or did he make them come here?
He said, hello, Exxon, be in Juneau tomorrow. I want to settle that Exxon lawsuit, and I want to do it in 60 days. They were there. The other governors we've had, most of them, get in a jet and they fly to Houston, they fly to London. Wally said, come to Alaska. That's what we're talking about.
All right.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot to miss there. Until 1979, Alaska shared its revenues 50-50 with local government. Was it wise for Alaskans to change that policy?
So far as I'm concerned, there's no question but that we should have a major revenue sharing programs with our local governments.
You bet.
Because that's the government that's closest to the people. And the state has the means of taxing big development, the oil development. The resources on state land in Prudhoe Bay belong to all the people of Alaska. But Dillingham and Kodiak and Anchorage cannot tax the Prudhoe Bay resource. So it's up to the state to channel the money. This is like the dividend. And Wally Hickel was a great proponent of the community dividend. We need to provide part of that state revenue to the local governments for them to spend it in behalf of the people at the local level, be they rural governments or Fairbanks or Juneau or Anchorage.
Excellent. All right, we have time for one more question. Let's see, the estimation is that 40% of Alaska's population turns over every 5 years.
Not anymore.
Do we do an adequate job of educating Alaskans about the owner state? I'm going to answer this one because we're short of time. I think that we've tried really hard to do that here tonight. I think there's a whole lot of people that take up a whole lot of airwaves that don't want Alaskans to know that they're sovereign, that they own part of the resource here, and that just being a citizen gives them rights and it also gives them responsibilities. In fact, a lot of the airwaves right now are trying to talk you out of that all the time. And so Alaskans, remember who you are, educate yourself on the owner state, and take good care of it. Show up for people who are supportive of this and who are willing to take a stand, even if it means they're not going to get giant checks at meetings at Bill Sheffield's house, so to speak. Thank you guys. Thank you for being such a great panel. We'll be back next week with more Up North.
Good job, Don.